to the show. We are here today on Forza Motorsport for a challenge for a relay race. Now, the way this one would work is a little bit different to the ones we have done in the past. So because of the numbers, we actually had 6 teams of 3. And each team was given a different era of vehicles to go racing with. We had 60s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. Well, there was supposed to be 70s, but the team that was going to be drawn it opted to... couldn't quite make it work, so went for 2020. Now, each team was given 1,800 PI to spread across their 3 vehicles. But the catch is, this time around, the vehicles were all stock. You couldn't build and modify or change a car in any way, shape or form. You had to pick stock vehicles, and their PIs combined together had to be 1,800 or less. Of course, my orange team, we were drawn in the 1960s, which was quite an interesting selection. For our first race, we would head to Homestead, Miami. The way these work, if you've never seen one of these before, is each car within a team, has to complete a lap. At the end of those laps, the first car across the line will be victorious. So there's a whole bunch of strategies at play. Green team, for example, they were running the 80s cars in this one, were sending out their prototype first. So, some of these either weren't allowed to use open-wheeled or Formula 1 cars. You were allowed to use some very, very quick machinery. So, prototype could go out. Green team sent their very, very fastest car out first. The reason why you might do that is you get to run in clean air. You build a huge gap, you build a big lead early on, but you run in clean air. So while your slower cars will try and finish it off and they might get hunted down, you are at least maximising the run for each of your vehicle. Blue team were running a little bit more... similar spec vehicles. They did have they had the Ginetta, the GT4, that was running around here. That was also running the first leg, trying to build a margin. Wasn't going to be as quick as the prototype, but they'd have faster other cars. Now, one of the downsides, depending on what your vehicle spread is, you don't want to get stuck in traffic. The NSX had made a little mistake at the first corner and dropped into the middle of the pack. The wooden team with the 2000s cars was sending its NSX out first, but it got stuck in traffic. You're losing time at this point. You're losing massive amounts of time. Now, the Charger for orange team, this is pretty good news. It was the lowest PI car we had. If it holds up anybody for any amount of time, that is good news. Of course, the advantage we had with the Charger, not a great handling vehicle, but it did have some good straight line speed, which could make it difficult to overtake. The NSX went very wide. The Charger went very wide as well in their battling. And I mean, the more you fight, you do cost yourself a bit of time. Even if you are holding up a faster car, you are still costing yourself time. The NSX made its way through the pack, as you would expect, but it's bad news for the wooden team there. So, as it came towards the end of the first lap, it was, as you would expect, a very, very quick lap for green team. They set out a very, very fast car. I mean, the next 2 vehicles were much, much lower PI, and it would be the RX-7 that would be going out next. Yes, they've got a tremendous lead, and it is running in clean air, but they've got, slower cars, essentially, going on now. So it was all about, could the prototype have built a big enough lead for green team to hold on to? And then we waited for a little while for the next stuff to go. Blue team, they were going to cross the line. They were handing over to their lowest PI car, which was the Ginetta Junior, which was the lowest PI vehicle here, being E-Class, very top of E-Class, mind you. So Blue team had 2 pretty fast cars and 1 slow car. They would go, they needed a big gap because the rest of our teams had got some fast vehicles coming up at some point. The wooden team would send their prototype car out next. The good old Bentley would shoot off. I would fire up the Daytona. The first time I actually got to use the Daytona in Forza, and we would launch off and get ahead of the NSXs. We had our fastest car to come at the end, but in the 60s we didn't quite have the same. Well, we had some options. We opted to go for not quite the very fastest sort of Can-Am style car that we could have done because we wanted faster other vehicles, but we had a very fast Can-Am car to finish. I was going to try and do the best I possibly could with the Daytona. I will say, of course, these 60s cars, in stock guys are not the easiest of things to drive, certainly if you are not familiar with them. So while the PI is greater in this than the NSX, it is not the easiest to get to grips with. Now, unfortunately for Blue Team, technical difficulties, a controller malfunction for Longbow driving that Ginetta Junior would rather ruin their run. Sadly, that is something that can happen. You know, but if you make a mistake yourself, if you go off the track, it can be incredibly costly. But yeah, controller malfunction kind of rather dumped Blue Team out of contention here, because they were supposed to have, you know, a bit of a margin going in towards the end of the race, or, you know, better, but they were a bit unlucky in there. The Wooden Team, well, they would launch their their Bentley around here, and sure enough, it would catch and pass the Green Team's vehicle. Okay. I say no big surprise. Green Team would have been hoping to be ahead of the Bentley, would have been good for them. But, yeah, it was always going to be a difficult one, that one. So they would cross the line. They would, though, then release, of course, their slowest car in the form of the Celica. Still a very good car, do not get me wrong. Green Team would come around and cross the line, releasing their Ferrari. Now, it was Wooden Team had got a bit of a gap, but the Ferrari had a good opportunity here to try and chase down the Celica. Of course, this lot are miles out in front from the rest of us, because you can see the vehicles that are lining up here, ready to go. You've got a Toyota prototype, you've got a Porsche, you've got a Can-Am car for Orange Team. Blue were unfortunately a little bit out of this. They should be, you know, well out of position. But yeah, the Brazen driving the Can-Am McLaren is gone. The Toyota gets launched underway. The Porsche is then released as well, and it now becomes a case of, can these prototypes reel in A, Brazen, because the McLaren was a beast in a straight line, and B, would there be enough lap? Would there be enough time to catch up to the leaders? Because all of us further back, Orange Team, we'd just about managed to avoid battles outside of the first lap, but all the others, we had kind of been engaged in various battles amongst themselves. It was looking bad for the Celica at this point. It had held on for a little bit, but it was not going to be enough. The Ferrari was quick enough that it would catch and it would pass as it heads on to the back straight. So the Wooden Team were in trouble, and they were going to be in even more trouble as here came the rest of the incredibly fast machines. The Can-Am McLaren would go soaring past the Toyota. There's nothing the Celica is going to be able to do with that, and it would now be right onto the tail of the Ferrari. The problem is catching is one thing, but in this rather twisty section, it's not the easiest to pass, and Brazen has a go to the inside but can't quite do it. Makes a little bit of contact with the Ferrari. Both go sliding, and it is a gift for Pink Team. It is a gift for the Toyota that would sneak past and steal a victory. The McLaren would have to settle for second at the end of this one. Green Team could not quite hold on for third. The Purple Team's Porsche just ran out of time, and while it did get up into fourth place, that was as good, and it wasn't quite close enough to battle and challenge with the cars ahead. Yeah, the Wooden Team would come home in fifth. Blue Team were very unlucky. Technical difficulties kind of screwing that one over. Orange Team, we got incredibly close. Possibly could have done it with a bit cleaner a pass. Just hit traffic at the wrong point, right at the very end. But it had been an interesting first round, and things had been pretty damn close, considering the variety of vehicles that we had going on. So race number 2 would go to Sebring. We tried to do a bit of a push start. The Daytona, not a good vehicle to do push starts with because it got such a long first gear. Couldn't push the Charger off the line. So strategies, well, they were changed about a little bit. Orange Team, we stuck with the same strategy. Blue Team were going with a similar strategy. Purple Team were going for the run out front early on strategy. Send the Porsche out and build that massive gap. It almost worked out for Green Team in the previous round. With there being 6 teams running in this, we were actually seeing a whole variety of different strategies being tried. Now, while the Porsche would go off and vanish into the distance, as you would expect it to do, I mean, you got, you know, like a mid-P class car against, well, D and B class cars. A massive advantage. Further back would begin a battle that would rage across multiple races, in fact. The Wooden Team versus Pink Team, the 90s versus the 2000s would rage on, because they had gone for a fairly similar strategy here. The Civic and Celica not that dissimilar in terms of pace, and when you do this, while it's great fun, of course, we all love close wheel-to-wheel racing, the Civic here looking to the inside at the hairpin, trying to steal a pass, and does get past. You know, we all love close racing, but this is costing them time. I mean, it was good news again for us on Orange Team. The Charger was going out first, and it was a little bit higher PI than the two vehicles, than the Civic and the Celica, but it's also helped that they're fighting each other. The Dodge was never really under any pressure in this one. The Dodge never really found itself with any traffic to be dealing with here. So it was Rusky driving the Dodge, could just drive around at their own pace. I mean, bit sideways on the curb, not the only one. The Civic then also did the same thing. Of course, you've got to try and learn the cars very, very quickly with this. No one's necessarily done laps with these cars around, this track. Well, you've probably never driven the stock cars around these circuits before. So you've got to kind of immediately switch on and immediately figure out the limits and push as hard as you can, but not wanting to make a mistake, because mistakes are hugely, hugely costly in a relay race. So as we weave through the twisty bits, and the two Japanese cars would gradually close up, get onto a straight, and the Charger would be able to run away. Of course, further down the road was the green team's Ferrari. That was also sort of driving around on its own, and then further forward again, you had the Ginetta, the GT4, or the Ginetta Senior, as I've forgotten who nicknamed it while we were in the lobby, but I find it quite amusing, was also running around on its own. So, yeah, these two fought each other pretty hard throughout the first lap. They didn't cost each other as much time. They did a bit, not as much as it could have been. So, it came to the first handover point, and Purple Team would cross the line with a big lead, as you would expect. However, the next two vehicles are not amazingly fast. So, they've got a really, really big gap, tremendous lead, but your next two cars aren't particularly quick, and they're finishing with the slowest car, with the GT86. The Lincoln Co., while not bad handling, is not very quick down a straight. Not really what you want. When it comes to Sebring, Blue Team would then hand over from the Ginetta Senior to the Ginetta Junior that got one hell of a shove from the Viper. Green Team would then send out their prototype. That would go howling off into the distance, and, the goal was to go and try and chase down the Purple Team, because Green Team are going to be finishing with their slowest car, with that RX-7. They needed as bigger a lead as they could, or they needed a lead, really, if it was going to be able to happen. Because Ginetta Junior going to be able to do nothing against this prototype. You just sort of stay out of the way of it. You let the prototype go soaring past. Of course, Blue Team have got a Viper, which is S-Class, I think. I've slightly slipped my mind now, but they've got a quick car to go at the finish. Now, the rest of us were all pretty clustered up at this point, all being in, sort of the D-Class cars, varying levels of D-Class car. The Cobra, the Daytona, was fired off the line with a bit of help from Brazen to get it going, and then the NSXs were sent on their way. Now, my Shelby was a little bit faster, but Shelby's up in A class, the NSXs are midish B class, so, the Daytona was going to be the quicker of this group, and the goal was to try and pull away. The goal for me was build as bigger a gap as I could to these NSXs. If we could close in on the likes of the Ginetta Junior, fantastic. That's what we want to try and be doing. But yeah, pull away from these two. Give Brazen as much chance as possible, because Pink Team and the Wooden Team had got their prototypes, their LMP cars, going to be giving chase. And what helped me, not that I could see a huge amount of it, but when I was looking back, the thing that was very, very good news for me is the NSXs were starting to fight. The slightly more modern NSX was a little bit faster, as you would be expecting, but track position meant it was behind, which meant it was now starting to lose a little bit of time. And Danger Man driving the pink NSX here, it was well within their right to make this as awkward as possible. They're going to make it difficult, because Pink Team want to hand over with the lead at this point. Both got LMP cars, both got quick cars to finish. If you can hand over in the lead, if you could hand over the front of this group, then fantastic. It makes it easier for your LMP car to go chasing off after the Orange Team's Can-Am car and the rest of the vehicles that are running. But yeah, this was great news for me, looking back. And I did an okay job with the Daytona. I did an okay job managing to pull the gap, let's say, as much as I could. It was Stevie, I think, driving in the wooden vehicle, having a bit of a look around, but just not quite finding anywhere to get past through all of that. Now, we head back to the changeover point, because of course the prototype for Green Team was very fast. Listen, unbelievably quick, as you would expect. But then it sends off the RX-7. No, not a bad car whatsoever, of course, but it's a long lap, and again, Green Team had got their relatively slow vehicle to try and see this see this round out if they could do. But again, Green Team done a good job of managing to not really have any of their cars fighting one another. Very, very helpful indeed. So, for the rest of the changeovers, I had done a pretty good job of chasing down the Ginetta Junior, and I put Brazen in a very good place here. We launched just behind the Viper, and it wasn't going to be too much of a problem for the crazy McLaren. Yeah, brutally fast in a straight line, this thing. Not the easiest to drive, and fair play to Brazen, because I don't know if I'd be very good with this car. It is leery and fast and scary. You can see the Viper actually being quite good through the corners while on cold tyres. But yeah, the McLaren, monstrously quick, very sideways. My hope was that, well, not only had we caught the Ginetta and we put Brazen in a good place to get past Blue Team now, hopefully I was as close as we could be to the Green Team's vehicle. Now, there was a little bit of a mess up, I will say, from Orange Team here. So, while I pulled away from the two NSXs, while we're in the waiting area, Rusky was driving around with the Charger and forgot that there were cars still to launch. And as the pink and wooden cars crossed the line, there was a bit of interference. It wasn't intentional. It absolutely wasn't intentional, but it was a little bit unfortunate for the poor Bentley that had to get a little bit squirrely to try and get away from it. So yeah, there was a small bit of, and quite understandably, the Bentley was not the most. Yeah, it was just a foolish error. Just completely missaw what was going on. So the Bentley had a little bit of a poor getaway. Not completely terrible, but yeah, not ideal. These two, I mean, both of these two here did still have quite a lot of work to do anyway to try and catch back up to the rest of the pack. Perhaps not helped too much by their respective NSXs battling with one another, but the pink versus wooden battle would be one that would rage on. Their team sort of composition in their cars were quite similar. Now, further back up towards the front, we had got the McLaren. It was running and it was going quickly, as you would expect. Sebring, a good sort of venue for this car. It was well clear of the Viper. It now had to try and chase down Purple Team and Green Team, because Purple Team, I forgot to mention them, of course, Purple Team had set off their BRZ that had ran out of time to go chasing down the RX-7, trying to defend, but there's only so much you can do against the McLaren, and sure enough, Braden would fire it to the inside and get the pass completed, would then get very squirrely out of the final corner, and then it's a race. It's a race to the finish line, and the closing speeds are immense as they came across the line, and it was very, very close indeed for the Can-Am car. Well, this is just how close is why we have a car on the finish line, so you can see this. It would be Green Team with the RX-7 that would do it, but only just. Only just. And you've got to bear in mind how fast the speed difference between these two cars is. That the McLaren was catching unbelievably fast. It was such a close finish. Like, you know, if any one of us on Orange Team had had a slightly better lap, we would have been able to win that. That's kind of how close it was. But that's what you want from a relay race, that you want it to be that close. The two prototypes, the Bentley had managed to close in on the Toyota a little bit as they headed towards the final corner. The Viper was doing its best, but it's going to come under huge pressure through this final turn. And, you know, sometimes the slightly slower cars can provide overtaking opportunities. This case, though, the Viper just did not have the grip to compete with these two, while Purple Team would hold on to third place. Pink Team would just hold on to fourth, ahead of the wooden car. Two LMPs not quite able to catch the pack. And well, there was a little bit of time lost at the launch. Don't think it actually affected the top three results, but possibly the Bentley could have beaten the Toyota with that one. And then I'm just going to point this out, and then the game crashed. This what we're going on at the end of this one. Everybody's game crashed, with the exception, it's a very bizarre crash, this one. Two cars were still running. Danger Man was one of them, who thankfully saved the replay for us, so we could actually see what went on in this. I think it was Blakey as well as the other one. Yeah. It was an absolute mess. Don't know what went on there, but there we go. For our final race, we would head to Kyalami, and, well, Pink and Wooden Team liked to run a similar strategy, and, well, they sent both of their LMP cars out. First, sure, why not? They can go and have their own little duel. I mean, it's very, very cool to be watching it. A big slide from the Toyota through there. The Bentley absolutely not giving up as they run through this first sequence of corners. It is a great pass from the Bentley there to go all the way around the outside and would come out in front. I mean, this is significant here. This is very, very important because as we get to the, the later stages, these two teams are burning their fastest cars now. They're only going to have slower cars to come. Other teams are going to have some really fast machinery. So, yeah, they really want to be running clean. If you're going to do this, use your fast car first. You really want to be running in clean air. You really don't want to be holding each other up. You've got to maximise your fastest car. To be fair, while it was a great battle for the first couple of corners, the Bentley did pull a little bit of a gap, so they weren't fighting each other as bad as it could have been, or as much as the rest of us were hoping. While Green Team opted to send out their Ferrari to run in some clean air away from the rest of us, we stuck with the strategy of running the Dodge. Now, managed to get ahead of the Lynk & Co. Because the Lynk is just not very fast in a straight line. The Charger was able to accelerate it down towards the first corner and then be a nuisance because, well, the Dodge was quick up the hills, the Dodge was quick in a straight line, and the Lynk & Co. really, really struggled to find a way past. Now, the Dodge is losing little bits of time here because Rusky was driving a little bit defensive, but Chris and Purple Team, I think it was Chris was in the Lynk, the Purple Team are just losing more. They're losing more because they really... So Rusky's... The Charger's not great through the corners, so you can only go so fast through it, and you're not held up on the straights, which is the Dodge's strength. Whereas the Lynk & Co. can't make its speed up through the corners because there's a great big muscle car in the way. It was very, very good news, really, for Orange Team in this one, managing to keep that vehicle behind. Although Blue Team were having a good run, the Ginetta Junior was just doing its thing on its own. As we went for the changeover, there was a little bit of a flinch from the Pink Team. Not quite a smooth transition. They kind of sorted themselves out in all of that one, and it was once again back to the Japanese showdown. Celica versus Civic. These two teams were running both of these races were running a very, very similar strategy, which kind of surprised me because it just keeps them in constant conflict. It keeps them in constant battle. And while it's good to know where your opponents are, naturally, you're making it difficult for yourself. Not impossible, but it's difficult. Civic with a wheel on the curb got very sideways indeed because, you'll see the Celica is potentially taking lines to be defensive. The Civic is going to be looking for lines for an overtake. Kyalami, I quite enjoy this track. Not the easiest to get passes done sometimes. Civic having a look around the outside. Very brave pass. A cool pass. A really cool pass. If you can manage to pull it off. Couldn't quite. Goes for a cutback. But then you're on the outside for the next corner. The Celica tries to fight it as hard as they can. But it's just not quite going to be enough. And the Civic moves up a place. But don't forget, of course, when they change over, they've both got NSXs to come. And it is the Wooden Team's NSX that is the slightly faster of the two. So this battle here is incredibly, incredibly significant for these two teams. But then there's also, a bunch of other teams. There are 4 other teams that are doing completely different strategies around here. The Celica monster in the corners, able to carry some speed. Now, when we went for changeovers further back, while they were having their own little battle, there was some slight adjustments to the Orange Team strategy. So because that start-finish line, we needed the track to be wide enough for us to all grid up. Because that start-finish line is technically a little bit further along than the actual race finish line, we decided to send out the McLaren next because technically speaking, the final lap is a little bit shorter, so we wanted to utilise as much of the McLaren as we could. Green Team were saving their prototype till last, so it was unsurprising that Blakey with the Porsche would go flying past. It was never going to be the case that the McLaren was going to be able to stay ahead of the Porsche. The goal was for Brazen to just go as quick as possible because we knew Purple Team had a GT86 to finish against my Shelby Daytona. I was going to have the faster car. It puts a lot of pressure, the final car, that has an awful lot of pressure in this one because they've got to try and be making up time and everything. But yeah, Purple were burning their fast car now to go and try and close down the lead NSXs, if you would like. And Blue Team would be sending out, I think they sent out their Ginetta at this point to try and chase down the pack after their slow start. So while the prototypes were launched, this was the goings-on at the front. The Civic had been able to pull a little bit of a margin. Not a huge amount, but it just ran very wide down here. And it's little things like that that could have been costly. Had the Celica found a way to sneak past there, would have been very, very helpful indeed for the Wooden Team, but not quite. But yeah, the Civic just did not have the gap that it would have wanted. we know the NSXs are both pretty close, but it's not quite the gap it was wanting. Purple team was arriving, as you would imagine. They're side by side out of the final corner, with the Celica having to yield eventually. Purple team, though, would take the lead of the race as they launch their GT86. Then goes the two NSXs. I mean, it was a lead for Purple, but it was not the biggest of the leads here. Across the line goes the McLaren, and that would set a Shelby Daytona off. Now, I had a lot to do in the Daytona because I was hoping to be closer, but we had a lot of work to try and do. The thing that gave me some hope was that this lot were all close together, and they were going to have to be battling with each other. They were going to slow each other down, and I had clean track in front of me and no cars immediately behind me to deal with. The GT86 or BRZ, whichever, I think it's GT86, regardless, was finding itself under attack from the NSXs. Pink team goes one side, the wooden team sends their NSX to the inside, and it would be the 2000s vehicle that would just about pop out in front of the 90s cars as Dangerman goes for a little bit of rallycross. The GT86 just not quite able to hang on, not quite able to live with the two NSXs. Of course, green team, let's not forget here, had a monster to come. No one was running crazy quick vehicles outside of green team this time around for their final leg. We had all burnt our faster cars earlier on. Blue team had their Viper trying to hunt us down, but of course this thing here was vastly quicker than anything. So the real question became what was going to happen with the manic battle up at the front. How much would we slow each other down? Because if we slowed each other down too much, again, green team had been running in clean air the entire time. They had had no battles. They'd actually worked the strategy quite well throughout all of these to never really put their vehicles in any sort of battles. So it became the question, could the prototype, could the Nissan hunt everyone down? I was trying to do my best with the Daytona to catch the vehicles ahead, and it was rather helped as Dangerman would run wide on their own, dumping the NSX onto the gravel, and that made my life somewhat easier. Promoted the Shelby up into a third place. Now, I had the Toyota in my sights, and that one there felt eminently passable. We knew we had great straight line speed. The Daytona pretty good through the corners, pretty good under braking, and I knew if I was going to stand a chance of going after the leader, we had to have a dive here, and while the Toyota tried to cover the inside, it was not quite going to be enough. Sure enough, we could fire the Daytona to the inside. Toyota looked back, tried to have a go to the inside on the exit, but it was never going to be able to match the acceleration of the Shelby. I had just one more car to go, but of course, while I was doing that, there was an incoming green machine, and of course, the speed differential here is immense. You've got a P-Class car closing down on, well, definitely not P-Class cars. Blue team's Viper was catching up to the NSX, but it was going to immediately come under fire from green team. The pink team NSX, no chance here. You can't do anything against this sort of power, but the green car was running out of time into the final corner, and the NSX had got the lead of the race. I knew the Daytona was going to be quick, accelerated. We knew the Daytona was good in a straight line, but it was just too much to do. The NSX would take victory. It would be second place for the Daytona, with green team coming home in third. Purple team would just hold on to fourth ahead of blue team, with pink team at the back of the field. But if Dangerman hadn't, there was a big shunt, of course there was. If Dangerman hadn't made a mistake on that uphill section, we would have got the Toyota. I don't know whether it would have been very close whether we could have got the pink NSX. Would have been very, very close indeed, and quite how that would have all played out. Because if I'd fought the NSX for any amount of time, the prototype would have got the both of us pretty much. Or if the NSXs had fought each other, I might have got both of them, or the prototype might have got all of us. This was actually really, really interesting to do. It was really, really good fun, I have to say. Having so many teams and so many different strategies proved very, very interesting. The era aspect of it as well was very good fun. I mean, there were a lot of, very, very strong cars, and some eras simply didn't have the same, selection, if you like. The 60s were good, though. We did not quite have the same high-end stuff, but we actually made it work very, very well indeed. We got 3 second places and we're close to the lead. Probably could have won the first one, possibly should have won the first race, could have won the second race. The third race didn't quite go. I don't think I could have done too much more in that one. But the 60s were very, very consistent. But a lot of teams were had good races and had bad races. I think blue team were a little bit unlucky in that I think the car selection was good. I liked the ideas. Unfortunately, the tracks that we were using, because we needed really, really wide grids so that we could actually line up and do this, the tracks that we were using tended to be the bigger, faster circuits, and, well, the Ginettas are very much handling cars, so I don't think the tracks quite suited the blue team as much in that one, which is a little bit unfortunate for them, along with technical difficulties as well. But yeah, this was great fun. I really, really enjoyed this. Got some really interesting results in this. It was good to see all sorts of different strategies and all sorts of different cars be competitive, because it wasn't just one strategy that worked here. Teams one sending out fast cars first, fast cars last, and in the middle it was, yeah, very, very varied, which is what you want. That, though, is going to be it from me. Thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.